Okay, next day, we're going to talk about the next of these 67 steps. The 67 frameworks, the principles, the rules, the guidelines you're going to need to accomplish those big goals that you have in life. So I call this one Sam Walton's Night in a Brazilian Jail and Stealing from McDonald's. We're going to be talking about humility, the humility it's going to take. This is one of those foundational steps. So all the 67 steps are important, but there's a core set. This is part of that core set that's ultra important. And when you think about success, Sam Walton has to come to mind. Now, you might not agree with Walmart, the company that he founded. It's a controversial company, but you can argue that the man was able to accomplish those things that he set out to do. He built Walmart, started in 1945. Now, it'll probably be, if not the first, one of the first of the trillion-dollar revenue companies. Trillion-dollar. What did he do? What was his trick? As you read his book, Made in America, which is one of the books on my recommended list, and you should be going through that recommended list. We'll talk about that later, but this 67 steps, this is a foundational book, Made in America. He wrote it on his deathbed. There's some interesting stories in there, and there's some interesting stories that aren't even in the book. But one thing, as we step back even away from that particular story, or the story of Ray Kroc we're going to talk about, or Jeff Bezos, or the man who started, his family started Marriott Hotels. We're going to talk about that story too, by J.W. Marriott Jr. And again, this doesn't just apply to business. This is any goal in the good life: health, wealth, love, and happiness. Humility. Everybody that I know thinks they have it. I think I have it. You probably think you have it. To a certain extent, you and I do have it. But I'm talking about a whole new level of humility. I'm not talking about the humility that you grew up with, where, you don't look somebody in the eyes and you kind of look down and go, yeah, I don't know everything. Blah, blah, blah. I call that outward humility. The world is full of people with outward humility. Okay? And then you have certain people that seemingly have no humility. Let's take a Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was known for being, in many ways, one of the cockiest people that you would ever meet. Just absolutely a cocky guy, outwardly. But do you know what his coaches said about him? Well, his coaches said, if you read that, my friend Roland Lazenby wrote the book Michael Jordan, The Life. And let me read you a part. It's talking about Jordan. This ability for Jordan to listen was among his most precious gifts. To his coaches, his capacity to be coached was his single most impressive attribute. Dean Smith, who was his college coach, asserted, I have never seen a player listen so closely to what the coaches said and then go and do it. So, Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player possibly of all times. What was his secret? Well, his coach said it right there. I've never met a person who would A, and if you're writing this down, number one, listen, and then B, go and do it. Like the Dalai Lama says in his book Beyond Religion, 3 levels of listening, just pure listening. C, understanding and comprehending. And, 2, understanding and comprehending. And 3 is what? Making it instinctually part of who you are. So when we're talking about humility, and the humility it's going to take you as you go through the 67 steps, it's not lip service, because Michael Jordan, although he was the most coachable person, was the cockiest of all. But it didn't matter. Most of us are outwardly humble, and inwardly very cocky. You don't believe me? Well, let me ask you this question. How many mentors have you tracked down, gone around the world, found, begged, pleaded to become your mentor in whatever goal you're trying to accomplish? If you want to be a movie producer, if you want to be an actor, if you want to be a business person, if you want to be, find love, lose weight. How many people have you tracked down in your life and said, look, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm here because I need your help. I need your help. See, probably not a lot, right? But you do realize, and I realize, how much benefit I can get from that. Let's assign a numerical value to your humility. How many times have you done that in your life? I'm talking actively sought out somebody. You might have had to go on a plane. And once I got on a plane when I was in my early 20s, and I went all the way to Australia. Then I landed in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia, got on another plane, flew to Lancashire, Tasmania, the small island of Tasmania. Then I got in a car, rented a car, and drove across the island to a little known, to visit a little known village where there was a guy named Bill Mollison. He's wrote a book about permaculture. It's about like sustainable, organic type agriculture. You see, at that point in my life, I was humble enough to say, I don't know the answers. I had saved up $17,000 and I spent it all traveling around the world because I was saying, I don't know. I need to know. Michael Jordan was the first guy to show up at practice. Even when he was the NBA champion, the MVP of the whole league, of the world, the greatest, really at Michael Jordan's peak, he was the most well-known person in the world. Johnny Bach, his assistant coach, or Tex Winters, they said the man listened. Even there's a Steve Kerr, one of his players that played with him, said, Jordan was the cockiest guy on the outside. You would think that you couldn't talk to him. He said, but one time I sat down with him and I made some suggestions. And he's like, I was in awe that the best basketball player of all times was listening and began to implement what Steve Kerr, who was just not a very good player, had mentioned. You see, that was the key. And going back to Sam Walton, 1945, he started Walmart. What was his attitude? Well, his wife says in the book, you'll read, where she says, Sam, I think you spend more time in our competitor's store across the street. And Sam Walton's attitude was, yeah, I already know what I know about our store. I got to go out and learn. He bought himself, as his career progressed, he bought himself a little airplane, not really a private jet, just like a little two-seater prop job airplane he liked to fly. And he would spend the majority of his time, 8-9 hours a day, flying to competitors' stores and walking through them. Sometimes he would fly and look for new sites for new stores for himself, but often he was in competitor stores. He said at one point in the book, he says, I believe no one has ever spent more time in a competitor's store than me. And what was the reward for Sam Walton's humility? $160 billion he made, personal net worth for himself and his family. He split it among his trusts for tax reasons, but among family trusts, but that was his $160 billion. That's more money than Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs all combined, right? And that was born from this deep, authentic, honest humility, not outward humility that you and I often show when we meet people like, yeah, I don't know it all, but really we act like we know it all. You want another numerical assignment of or score on how humble you are? How many books have you been reading? Who's more humble? Somebody who says, yeah, I read, a book a month, or someone's like, man, I got to learn. I'm talking about nonfiction books. I'm reading a book a day. I say it's the person who reads a book a day. That's the more humble person, or the book a week. The more you read, the more you're saying with your actions. There's a good story, and those of you know I'm not really religious, so sometimes I bring up, the Bible or Buddha or whatever. Don't get offended, whatever you believe. I'm just finding great teachings in anything and bringing it to the table here. So there's a parable of Jesus Christ, where Jesus Christ said there was a father with 2 sons. And he said the father asked his sons to do something. The first son said, yes, Father, I'll do it, but then never went and did it. The second son said, no, Father, I'm not going to do it. But then in actuality, he went and did it. Then Jesus turned to the crowd and said, who obeyed? And the answer is obvious. It's the son who said he would not do it, but then ended up doing it. You see, I don't care about what your outer humility is. Some people know me. I come off sometimes as a little bit cocky. But if you look at the actuality, if you peel back the layers and get to reality, that's what that parable by Jesus was. Get to the reality of the fact. Most of the world is full of people who say, yeah, I'll do it, but never do. Yes, I'm humble. But then you would never say of their lives, yeah, they listen better than anyone, and not just listen, but go out and implement. You must become an implementer. And that's going to take humility. Sam Walton, two great stories that are important for you to download into your brain and make part of who you are. This Brazilian group of businessmen, I think this was in the 80s or 90s, they had bought a whole bunch of stores in Brazil, and they wrote letters. They were actually humble. It's interesting. They wrote letters to the top, I think, 10 or 20 CEOs of the big stores in the United States, Kmart, Walmart, Sears, JCPenney, all these. And they said, could we take you out to dinner? Could we meet up with you and just get your advice on how to grow our business in Brazil? So they wrote the letter. Only one CEO replied to that letter. Guess who it was? Sam Walton from Walmart. By this time, of course, Sam Walton was, one of the top businessmen in the world, and Walmart was a massive company, but he agreed. So these Brazilians got on an airplane in Brazil, flew over. They landed in Bentonville, Arkansas, a little airport, and a pickup truck was waiting with a dog, and there was an old guy in it. And they pulled up, and they walked up to him and said, are you going to take us to Sam Walton? And the old man said, I am Sam Walton. Jump in the truck. So he's humble enough to pick him up himself. So they got in the truck. He took him to his house. Sam Walton took him to his house. His wife had home-cooked meal there. And these Brazilian businessmen began to eat dinner around the table. And Sam Walton said to him, oh, quick question for you. And asked him a question about Brazil. And then he asked another question, and another question, and another question. By the end of the night, these Brazilians were going, man, he's asking us more questions than we're asking him. We flew here to get answers from him, and it seems like he's getting all the answers from us. And then it dawned on them. Sam Walton had said yes to them because he wanted to learn from them. The number one retail, or number one or two at that point, discount retailer in the world was asking these newbie Brazilians if they had any piece of information. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, I learn from everybody that I meet. He had that level of humility, although he did say, most of the time it's what I don't want to do. But that's the attitude that Abraham Lincoln had. That's the attitude that Michael Jordan had. That's the attitude that Sam Walton had. J.W. Marriott, in the book The Spirit to Serve, Marriott's Way, J.W. Marriott Jr., his father had started the Marriott, multi-billion-dollar company, the hotel chain. And his son said, you got to have the humility to listen. He said, that's one of the reasons I was able to grow this to a $12 billion company at that point when he wrote the book. Because he was listening and then implementing what people said. Humility. Don't tell me you're humble. Show me you're humble. Now, let's take this Sam Walton story. Gets even more interesting. Those men go back to Brazil, and eventually Sam Walton goes to visit down in Brazil. So he's down there, and the host family, he's in Sao Paulo, Brazil, one of the biggest cities in the world. And all of a sudden his host family gets a phone call, and they said, Sam Walton, this was the police department. We put Sam Walton in jail. You got to come bail him out. So of course, if you know anything about a Brazilian jail cell, it's a pretty dangerous place for a billionaire to be. So they rush down the host family, and they go to the police. They storm up to the front desk, and they're like, what are you doing? Why are you arresting this American billionaire? Don't you know who he is? Why are you putting him in a jail cell? And they said, well, we didn't know who he was. We found this old guy crawling around the floors of different stores in Sao Paulo, and we thought he was lunatic, so we put him in jail, to protect him or whatever, protect the population. So, of course, they brought Sam Walton out, and they said to Sam Walton, the host family said, what were you doing? Why were you crawling around the floors? And he said, I had a tape measure, and I was crawling around the floors, and I was measuring how wide the aisles are in various stores in Brazil, because I wanted to see if these people knew something that I didn't. Think of that. What level of humility is. So I call it, Sam Walton's night in a Brazilian jail. Do you have that level of humility that you're so obsessed with the thought that other people know things that you don't know, that your life, not just 1 hour a day, but your entire life, you project that attitude? Oh, you know something I don't know? Growing up, I used to call this Robin Hood mentality. You must have the Robin Hood mentality. What that means is, it's not like Robin Hood, the story, used to steal from rich people and give it to the poor. Well, the way I do the mental Robin Hood approach. What's that mean? Well, the mental Robin Hood approach means you see every person as having a piece of gold in their brain, and you try to take their gold and give it to yourself, the poor. Now, I don't mean you literally take something from them, but I'm saying every person you meet. Now, let me step back. Not every person you meet. Like Abraham Lincoln said, most people don't know what they're talking about. And I'm actually a believer in being picky in who you listen to. But when you find the right person and those right people, generally you have to track them down. You go into that attitude that I'm poor, give me your riches. Please share your knowledge with me. If I got to crawl down around on the floor and get arrested in Brazil, if Sam Walton at the $1 billion level was still doing that, how about me and you? I'm as guilty of this as you. How do you and I project the attitude that literally we are willing to do that? Get down on our hands and knees, be humble, crawl around, research, study? No. I've got millions of people who follow the stuff that I do now. And it's almost nobody. When I talk to them, they're like, hey, Ty, I'm trying to accomplish this goal. I want to start a business. I want to make $1 million. I want to blank, blank, blank. I want to, make beautiful art. I'm like, well, how humble are you? Tell me the stories that you've been tracking down the best mentors in the world. Like Pablo Picasso said, we'll talk about that later in another one, but Pablo Picasso, what did he say? He said, good artists copy, great artists steal. We're going to talk about this in another one of the 67 steps. But the mentality, Picasso's like, man, it's not in ourselves that we find the answer. It's in the humility that Sam Walton had to learn from others. And let's keep going through this. Who else was like that? Well, I'll tell you an anecdotal, personal story. One of my business partners is one of the top internet business guys you'll ever meet. He makes about $3 million a month. About couple million bucks a month net. He's not even, he's in his early 30s. And he was over at my house, and I don't know, he lives on the East Coast, and he was over at my house one summer, and I was playing basketball, and we were playing basketball in front of my front yard, and I asked him a question about accounting, and I was like, hey, we need to do this for our partnership. I asked him a question, and I could tell I asked him kind of an advanced accounting question. I could see his face like he was embarrassed. He didn't know the answer. In fact, I don't even think he knew what I was talking about. So I kind of dropped it. I didn't want to embarrass him, so I was like, oh, okay, we'll talk about it later. About 3 months later, he was back at my house. We're playing basketball again. I like to do that pretty often, talk to people while I'm getting some exercise. And he said to me, he said, Ty, I asked him that accounting question again because I really needed to know. And all of a sudden, he answered back the most astute, intelligent answer about, he had comprehensive knowledge about accounting suddenly. And I was like, 3 months ago, you didn't even know the first thing. How do you know so much about accounting now? And he turned to me and he said, flashcards. Flashcards. He said he had gone home after that first meeting 3 months ago. He had bought some textbooks, used textbooks off Amazon about accounting, had made little 3x5 note cards, flashcards. While he was brushing his teeth, he would read these flashcards. And he said, yeah, it took him about 3 months. By the way, that's similar to 66 days, right? 2-3 months to form a new habit, new set of knowledge, new skill set, like the University College London said. And he was now knowledgeable. And I had to think, man, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. This is a guy already netting $1 million a month, $12 million a year. I think Mitt Romney, who ran for president of the United States a few years ago, he reported his income as net is $13 million. So I got a buddy, he's like, at that level, net. but yet he's still willing to write out flashcards and grow his knowledge base. It's funny, I have these friends who make a little bit of money. You know, they make $1 million a year or whatever. They're like, and they're the cockiest dudes ever. And I'm like, they've plateaued, man. And if they're not careful, it's going to go down, down, down. But my friends, you know, I always talk about rich friends, poor friends. Well, my rich friends are the humblest of all. They read the most. That shows humility. They hunt people down who could become mentors. They talk them into, they plead, they humbly say, I don't know. They listen actively in the sense that you say one thing, like that guy I brought up the first time he was there playing basketball with me, I just brought up accounting one time. I didn't go, you need to, go get flashcards. He did that on his own. See, he was a quick learner. He took one minute signal from me that he didn't know something, and he was humble enough to absorb that signal. Read that we talked about this before, right? Reading the obvious signs, changing on a dime, adaptability. He knew he needed to increase his worth a damn deserve it awareness factor, and he did it, and the humility was the catalyst to make it all happen. Don't tell me how humble you are. Just give me some facts about yourself. Do not tell me you're humble. Just tell me how many books you read about the field you're trying to learn. Tell me how many mentors you've acquired. Tell me how many flashcards you've written. Tell me how many hours you've spent in your competitor's store or in your mentor's vicinity, learning from them, learning from your friends and learning from your enemies, getting on airplanes and traveling to where you need to go, spending your money. Like the old saying goes, where your treasure is, there's your heart. Also, you want to know how humble people are? Ask them how much money they spend on tracking down people and learning. Remember, Sam Walton had an airplane. That thing is expensive to fly around. All he did was spend time in competitor stores because he saw the value. You have to have that level of humility, that you are not just talking the talk, but you can show me mathematically. Ty, here's how many hours I spent, my precious hours of my life, doing this, humbly listening and activating that skill in my life. Here's how many books I read. Here's how many mentors I acquired. Here's how many seminars I went to. And not just seminars I went to or books that I bought and just skimmed through it so I could say I read a book. It's not about numbers. It's about, like Jordan said, like Dean Smith said about Jordan. I've never met somebody, I've never seen a player listen so closely to what the teacher said and then go and do it. Michael Jordan said about himself, I was like a sponge. Even if I thought my coaches were wrong, I tried to listen and learn something. Isn't that amazing? Jordan said, my greatest skill was being teachable. My greatest skill. You saw that at every level in Michael Jordan. You see the same principle in Sam Walton. You see it in J.W. Marriott Jr. You see it in my business partner. Right? Remember I said the 67 steps is not based on me, Ty. It's based on me helping compile common traits, streams of consciousness that run throughout people who do great things. Humility. Spiritual teachers said things like, unless you become like a child, you will never inherit the kingdom. It's a famous saying. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter into the kingdom. That's another famous spiritual saying from thousands of years ago. Buddha, same thing. Gandhi, same thing. I lived with the Amish for 2.5 years. They lived a life of humility in action. In action, not the humility in outward trappings that the world is full of today. You want something, you be humble. I talked about this in my TED Talk. Everybody wants the good life, but not everybody gets the good life because not everybody's humble enough to be like Sam Walton and get on their hands and knees and crawl around and see if these people know something that you don't know. You have to know. The more you quote unquote know, probably the less you know. And I know that's a little bit cliche in a certain sense. There's a certain sense that I think there's truth to that. In a certain sense, I think there's not truth. I think it's okay to know stuff. It's okay to be confident. Like Jordan had the things that he knew, he's like, hey, I know. But it was like this balance, this kind of dichotomy, this irony to his personality. Same with Sam Walton. Jeff Bezos. Let's talk about him. You know, Jeff Bezos, if you read the book, The Everything Store, he's the guy who started Amazon's worth $38 billion. I think now he's almost richer than Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. And another company on its way to make $1 trillion. You know who Bezos was obsessed with? Sam Walton, learning from him, reading his books, traveling and hunting down the best people. He carried a notepad with him, writing stuff down. It's another numerical score that you can assign to your level of humility, and I hope you'll increase this after listening to this. When you meet with people, how many notes do you take? I have a Evernote where sometimes I take electronic notes, sometimes I write it out and scan it and put it in my Evernote. I mean, if I could sell my Evernote for $1 million, because I've sat down at dinners with some of the greatest minds, greatest businessmen, the greatest leaders in the world, and I take notes and I go back and I read those notes. See, that's humility in action. I can prove to you I'm humble because I took the time to write. I'll have people come hang out with me, you know, saying, hey, Ty, I want you to mentor me or coach me. And I talk. They don't even have the recorder on. They don't even have, they're not even, you know, writing it down. Not that I'm so smart. I'm not. There's people much smarter than me. But to the extent that you've come to me trying to learn, show me some humility in action. Now, you listening to these 67 steps, you're already on the path to this level of humility. So all you got to do now is accelerate, 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 accelerate. Don't be happy with a level 5 level of humility. Push it to level 9, level 10. Your net worth, your value spiritually, your love life and social life, and your physical body are all going to be outgrowths of the level of humility you have. You know, grinding it out, the story of Ray A. Kroc, who started McDonald's. Fascinating story of, you know, 52, he worked as a paper cup salesman, sold milkshake makers for 20, 30 years. And when he became 52 years old, he ran into an opportunity here in Los Angeles, out in like San Bernardino. He was selling some paper cups or some shake makers, milkshake makers, to these two guys, the McDonald's brothers, two brothers. And he saw, wow, these guys know how to make French fries. Wow, these guys are selling 15-cent hamburgers and have a line out the door. So because Ray A. Kroc was another person with that humility, his mind was open. He realized some people knew something he didn't do. And he eventually brokered a deal with them where he just said, look, you guys can be McDonald's. I'll just license it from you, the brand name. I'll go out and make different stores, franchise stores across the United States. And of course, we all knew eventually McDonald's now is the #1 name brand in business, more than Coca-Cola. It's the most recognized brand. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the actual food. It's junky food making the world fat, but that's a separate conversation. And the point about McDonald's is simply this. Once again, like Sam Walton, we're not looking for perfection in Michael Jordan or Jeff Bezos or any person that we look to. What we are looking for is principles. We don't have to copy the bad. Use this to make a healthy fast food franchise. Use this to grow a business that you're proud of, but you can still use the success principles. Now, here's an interesting line from the book Grinding It Out. It is on page 72. In Ray Kroc, his autobiography, he says, I have often been asked why I didn't simply, copy the McDonald's brothers' plan. They showed me the whole thing. It would have been an easy matter, seemingly, to pattern a restaurant after theirs. Truthfully, the idea never crossed my mind. I saw through the eyes of a salesman. Here was a complete package, and I could go out and talk up a storm about it. Remember, I was thinking more about prospective multi-mixer milkshake sales than hamburgers at that point. Besides, the brothers did have some equipment that couldn't be readily copied. That especially fabricated aluminum griddle, for one thing, and the setup of all the rest of the equipment was in a very precise step-saving pattern. Then there was the name. I had a strong intuitive sense that the name McDonald's was exactly right. I couldn't have taken the name. But for the rest of it, I guess the answer is that I was so naive or so honest that it never occurred to me that I could take their idea and copy and never pay them a red cent. That's his humble way of saying, you know what? I was humble enough to realize these guys already had something going. I didn't need to be so cocky as go, well, I'm going to design the equipment myself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to create something better than McDonald's. See, he wasn't trying to build something better. He was humble enough to recognize an opportunity and say, Why can't I just build on top of what these guys have already built? That takes humility. It's amazing how many people come to me, Ty, I got a business idea. I'm going to start from scratch. I'm like, if this kid came to me the other day, or this email came to me from some guy, and he said, Ty, I've got the next $1 billion idea. I was like, oh, okay. $1 billion, that's a big claim there, right? And you probably have a friend, or you might have fallen prey to saying, oh, I got $1 billion idea. I was like, okay, great. And I wrote him back email. And he said, can I take you out to dinner? Now, normally for one-on-one consulting, I charge $1 million, up to $1 million if somebody, that's for a longer period of time, but I charge $10,000 to meet with somebody. And he didn't have a lot of money, so he said, hey, and I said, you know what? Answer this question correctly, and I'll you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money. I am not all about money. It's not all about that for me. I want to genuinely help people. So I was like, answer this question correctly, and I'll go to lunch for free with you. Help you build your business idea out. I said, have you ever built, you told me you had $1 billion idea. You ever built $1 million? He wrote back, no. I was like, okay, wrong answer. I wrote him, you ever made a business that made $100,000? No. Have you ever started any business that's made $1,000? No. Then I wrote him back, look, man, why are you talking to me about $1 billion? Are you that cocky that you're gonna start your first business trying to hit a home run, make $1 billion? I'm like, Warren Buffett started at 7 years old knowing he wanted to be an investor and allocate capital in the marketplace. And he read at 7 years old, Warren Buffett. One time was often, many years straight was the richest man in the world. 7 years old, he read a book by Benjamin Graham about the valuation of bonds. At 7 years old, by age 12, he went to the Omaha library school system and was like, I need more books. And they're like, sorry, you've read every book on finance twice in the whole state or the whole city library system. That's humble. But it wasn't until he was 57 years old that he became a billionaire. He started at 7. He mentored under Benjamin Graham. He went to Wharton. He worked for Benjamin Graham. At that time, the most one of the most knowledgeable people in the world on stock market and investing. And still, it took Sam Walton 50 years. It took Warren Buffett 50 years to become a billionaire. Yet this kid sending me an email and never started anything, and he's got $1 billion idea. It's too cocky. Now, maybe he genuinely has $1 billion idea, but I'd rather meet somebody who's just like, hey, I'm passionate about something. I've got an idea. I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. I'm hunting down people, the best people in the world who can help me. I'd love to do this. Hey, I don't really know what I'm doing. Can you give me a hand? And then you could be like Bill Gates, who at one point, Bill Gates, again, started at 12. It wasn't until he was 31 that he was a billionaire. 19 years. These are guys with 150, 160 IQ, immense talent, right? And it still took them 20 to 50 years to pull off what they were trying to accomplish. But yet, even and at one point, Bill Gates said, I don't think you could ever make more than $100 million in computer software. He didn't set out initially going, I got the next $1 billion idea. He wasn't that cocky. He was humble enough to go, I've got a goal I want to go after. I'm passionate about it, but help me. That's why I said the pattern, we're going to talk about this in others of the 67 steps, that's why almost everyone who does anything has a mentor. Jeff Bezos had a mentor. Ray Kroc had the McDonald's brothers. Sam Walton had a mentor that taught him about discount retailing. Michael Jordan had multiple coaches, many coaches, and he was, basketball mentors, guys like David Thompson, that he crafted his game after. That's the humility. Kobe Bryant copied Michael Jordan. There's a pattern among successful people. The Dalai Lama had a mentor. He was humble enough to say the answers weren't within him. He went without, and he found Mahatma Gandhi was his mentor. And Gandhi had a mentor. And Alexander the Great conquered the world, but that was after 2 years of having Aristotle 3 years, 14, 15, and 16. Aristotle mentored him, the greatest philosopher of the time. And Aristotle, of course, was mentored by Plato, and Plato theoretically by Socrates. On and on the pattern goes. The rich people, the successful people, the people who change the world, the thought leaders, the people who eradicate poverty. Martin Luther King Jr. had a mentor. Einstein had a mentor. Einstein, maybe the smartest person of our time, had a mentor. I had someone get in an argument with me about, oh, there's some people that didn't have mentors. Tesla. Read the story of Tesla. He had an immense amount of mentors. Humility. This is the emanation. This emanates from humility. You see it in Ray A. Kroc. Okay? These litmus tests, I want you to think. Stop for a second and legitimately ask yourself. Just keep a tally around these things. If you're writing down, write down a score on 1 to 10. Reading. How humble have you been in action, not in words, not in lip service? How many books have you read? Okay? And 1 to 10 meaning 1 is you haven't put much effort into it. 10 has been, you put as much effort. Everyone, of course, has a slightly different capacity, but a 10 is somebody who every minute that they could, they weren't playing video games, they weren't reading, they weren't, watching dumb TV shows. They were taking all the, reasonable amount of time that a human could, an hour a day, and reading about specific how-to books, reading biographies, not fiction, about people who accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish. So rank yourself 1 to 10. Write this down. Books. Number 2. How good have you been in tracking down mentors to help you? 2. Okay. That could include getting on a plane. Something that takes sacrifice. That's what a 10 is. Traveling the world. Spending your last dime finding something. 1 to 10. Write that down. Number 3. Copying the competitors. Spending the time. Like Sam Walton spent many hours a day, more hours, he said, than anybody in his competitor store. So whether you're in business or whether you're, whatever your goal, finding people who are already doing it and spending a lot of hours with them. 1 to 10, what's your effort level been? Right? How about spending your money on things? Money is the great test. Like I said, where your money is, there's your heart also. 1 to 10. How much money have you been spending, your hard-earned cash, on becoming a Robin Hood mentally, in terms of saying, I need to go to this seminar. I need to spend money for this airplane ticket. I need. What are you on 1 to 10? Now I want you to take those numbers, there's 3 or 4, I think we did 4 numbers, and I want you to average it. So if you got a 4, 8, 6, and a 7, average those together, add those together and divide them by 4. That is your average numerical humility score. Your humility in action, not in words. So forget what you meant consciously feel about yourself. The conscious mind is often diluted by the ego and diluted by, the pains in our brain trying to, it's like Freud said, life is often too hard for us. So we use 3 things. We use distractions, we use intoxicants, and we use substitutive effects. We try to forget. And so for many of us, we've assigned a numerical score to our humility. Yeah, we're pretty humble. I'm like a 7 or an 8. But add up the math. Like Descartes, the great philosopher, says, when all else fails, and he did a thought experiment and removed any belief he had in life that could possibly be incorrect, all he was left with was math. So what's your mathematical score? I would guess that the average, if you're like average person, it's a 5 or a 6. And here's the kicker for you. The quality, that number right there is probably the quality of your life. If you scored an honest 10, then you're probably living the good life right now. But if you have a 4 or a 6 or a 7, it's like Jim Rohn's mentor Earl Schoaf told him. Answer me this question and I can guess how much money you have in your bank account. I can guess what your body looks like by the answer to that. I can guess, without even meeting you, I can guess how much money is in your bank account. I can guess how high of a quality person you've attracted into your life in terms of friendship, in terms of your relationships romantically. It all hinges around this. I can guess the level of fulfillment, the tap dance factor, or the tap dance out of bed each morning. I can guess that by the score you've just given yourself. Your goal must be, as you go through this 67 steps for the next 67 days, you're some days already into it, but for the rest of this period of time, that score has to go up. You have to become a machine. Now, I want to talk about why, okay? Because before you can, Alan Nation, one of my mentors said, Ty, before you can change anything, you have to first understand why it is like it is. So the question is, I'm assuming nobody listening here got a 10. Maybe you got a 10. That would be amazing. But, most of us, depending on the period of my life, when I add up the numbers, there's been times when I've been a 4 on this. It ebbs and flows. There's a time when I've been higher. But when I was a 4, it wasn't my favorite time in life. When I was a 7, it was a lot better life. And I don't necessarily mean this is always going to feel good. At some point, for some of us, maybe you have a lot of pride. So it's going to be a pain in the butt to get to this place. But hey, who cares? That's why this is a 67-day program. Because in 67 days, according to University College London, you can begin to rewire the actual inner workings of your brain. Okay? So, why is the question. If you agree with me and you see the pattern in these great people, whether it be Ray Kroc, Sam Walton, Mahatma Gandhi, Alexander the Great, Martin Luther King Jr., if we see the pattern, Einstein, of massive levels of humility, if we agree with that, hopefully we do, then why do the masses not have that? Why do maybe you and I not operate at an 8, 9, or 10 level? I think you have to at least get to the 8, really to the 9 or 10 level. No one's going to be at 10. That's kind of perfection, but you should be definitely shooting for it. So why do we live in a world where people are such failures yet so cocky? There's another 67 step we're going to talk about, from where does the pride come? It's amazing the levels of pride that I bump into with people, and I'm going, hey man, where in the world is this level of pride coming from? Sam Walton was a billionaire and he was getting arrested because he was researching his competitors even when he's on vacation in Brazil. When he took people out to dinner, he was asking them questions, not the other way around. When he was a billionaire, where in the world does this level of pride come from in you that you're so cocky yet you can hardly pay your rent every month? Like, you're overweight. You hate your love life. Why are you so cocky? Well, as I mentioned, when we talk about Freud, okay, and Freud's another great person in many ways, not perfect. For those of you, whenever I bring up Freud, people are always quick to bring up, he didn't have all the answers. Well, anybody who's ever read Freud, pretty definitely one of the great thinkers of all time. And when you read Freud, it's fascinating. He says, that life is hard. The reason that most of us, you and I included, do not operate with the level of humility is for one simple, kind of sad reason. I'm going to read you what Freud here said. Let me see if I can find it here. And once we know this root, okay, here we go. He says, life as we find it is too hard for us. This is in Civilization and Its Discontents. Life as we find it is too hard for us. It entails too much pain, too many disappointments, impossible tasks. We cannot do without palliative remedies. We cannot dispense with auxiliary constructions. There are perhaps 3 of these means. Powerful diversions of interests which lead us to care little about our misery. So that's number 1. He says we get caught up in various powerful diversions. Number 2, substitutive gratifications which lessen our pain. And then he says, thirdly, and intoxicating substances which make us insensitive to it. So what Freud is proposing, and I'm going to propose to you the reason you and I have struggled with humility, is that humility is, in saying, oops, my bad, generally triggers a fear response. And if you study the human brain, not that I'm a neurobiologist, but my best friend and business partner is one of the top neurobiologists in the world, PhD, and he said to me, the brain, you have this amygdala part of the brain, which is kind of in the center of your brain, and it's the fear area. It stores fear memories. If you got bit by a dog when you're 3 years old, okay, you'll store fear memory. And those fear memories are almost impossible to ever get rid of. That's why people go to war, sometimes come back with post-traumatic stress disorder. It's hard to get rid of it because it's a deep-seated, rooted part of our brain to remember fear, okay? So you have that amygdala, and at some point in almost all of our lives, we've been humble about something. And somebody's used that period of time when we're humble to take advantage of us, okay? And we've been left back where Freud says, life becomes too hard for us. It entails too much pain, which comes from this fear, too many disappointments, impossible tasks. So what Freud says is once that fear hits us, okay, we then do, 3 different things. One of it is we try to distract ourselves from it, divert ourselves. We put new substitutions and we intoxicate ourselves. He's not just talking about alcohol or drugs, but he's saying we cover it up. So for most of us, we've been vulnerable, we've been humble, we've tracked someone down and we're like, hey, will you help me? I don't know what I'm doing. And they've turned to us in our moment of weakness and vulnerability and said, you're an idiot. Get away from me. I'm not going to help you. You're stupid. Or other people have laughed at the process. And, I was talking to Dr. Sharon Mollum, who's the geneticist, MD, wrote the book, the best-selling book that's out, Inheritance, fascinating book. He says, if you take 2 identical twins who basically carry the same DNA, right, the same genes, he says, if you separate them, and there's been instances of this that they've studied, and one of them gets bullied when they're like 13 or 14, the DNA changes. And that identical twin will never be the same as the other twin. Will struggle with suppressed cortisol levels, which sounds good, but actually if you suppress cortisol too much, more likely to have alcoholism and depression. So you see that traumas when we're younger, when we've been vulnerable, can often cause us so much pain that we overdo it in order to mask it. We overdo it by being cocky, by never really wanting to be like, oops, my bad, or to say, hey, I don't really know this. But these guys, these individuals, these men and women who stand out from the crowd are able to overcome that pain, not try to cover it over with cockiness, overcome their fears, right? And guess what they get? They get all the rewards that come from real humility. In the case of Michael Jordan, it's the #1 basketball player in the world. In the case of Mahatma Gandhi, it's changing the world. Or the Dalai Lama, having the satisfaction of knowing that you changed the world. Or if it's Ray A. Kroc or Bill Gates or Marriott Jr., it's becoming, building billion-dollar companies and building immense wealth for themselves. Whatever it is that you want, it's going to have to come from overcoming this great fear that you and I have. Okay? Without the removal of that fear, you are in a place, like we did with this numerical score on a 1 to 10, averaging up. You're probably a 4 or a 5 or a 6 or a 7. It's not enough to live a good life. Remember I said, my TED Talk, everybody wants the good life, but not everybody's willing to be humble enough. Understand your own deep-seated insecurities and fear that have caused you to put substitutive or intoxicating or diversionary layers over that humility that's there. We are ingrained, inborn with an instinct to be humble. Small children, when you and I were young, we had no problem saying, hey, help us. I don't know what I'm doing. How do I do this? Right? It's only the process of the pains and the traumas of life that cause us to begin to put layers over ourselves. Now, you got to do it within reason. You don't want to come off as just this. You can do this with some levels of pride. That's why I brought up Michael Jordan. I'm not suggesting you become this whimpering, I don't know anything, because that's back to outward humility. I don't care. If I hire somebody and they're the cockiest person in the world, I don't care. I don't care if they're like, dude, I know what I'm going to make. I don't care about that as long as it's backed up by action. When Michael Jordan said, I'm the best basketball player in the world, that's okay for humility. To me, that's the truth. He is. Michael Jordan wasn't the kind of guy that had lip service. He wasn't like, we'll see who's going to win this basketball game. He was playing against Utah, I think, in the World Championship, and he was talking about one of the players that had to guard him, and he's like, I'm going to annihilate you, man. That was outwardly the cockiest thing to say. But back in the gym, Michael Jordan was like, what should I do, Tex Winters? What should I do, Johnny Bach? What should I do, Phil Jackson? He had 10 different coaches around there. He was humble enough in action, so when it came time to win the NBA championship, basketball championship, he did win it. So I don't really care how you are outwardly. I'm not suggesting you start, just coming off as this totally kind of weird, because I've seen people take this to extremes and just get weird about it. Don't worry about the words that you say. Unimportant. Start tallying up the hours that you spend per day. Start tallying up the dollars that you spend per day. Measure your humility that way. Inwardly, a deep-seated, secretive type humility is what I'm seeking from those people that I invest in. And I would like, I'm investing in you. You've invested in this listening in this time. My investment is in you. And I'm saying, in order for me to pull off what I'm trying to offer you and what I'm, in a sense, promising you about helping you find the good life in these 67 days, I don't care. Outward stuff. You can write me the cockiest stuff ever, as long as even that kid who I said wrote me, I have $1 billion idea. It wasn't so much just saying I have $1 billion idea that came off as too cocky, because that's just words. It wasn't like, hey, listen, the last 5 years of my life, I spent time working at the top 10 competitors. I want to, let's say, I don't know what business, I want to start a hotel, let's say. I think I got $1 billion new idea hotel. If he had written me this email, it'd be all different. I've written, so he writes me this email, it's imaginary, hypothetical. It says, Ty, I've got $1 billion idea on how to change the hotel industry. I've read 68 books about the hotel industry, and every biography and autobiography of any person who's ever started a hotel. Hilton, Marriott, so on. I've studied anything related to construction, anything related to the hospitality business. I have, for the last 3 years, done 3 internships. I've traveled to 40 countries. I've spent 150 hours a month in competitor hotels, documenting, carefully writing down. I've made 3 hotel owners my mentors, and on and on and on. If that email, and he said, I got $1 billion idea, can I take you to lunch? I would have showed up. What I didn't like, it was just an idea. And it was $1 billion when he hadn't started anything small. If that same person had emailed me also and said, you know what, I've started a small hotel chain. We've got two small 5-person bed and breakfast for the last couple of years. Then I'm growing it to this, and now I got the $1 billion idea. That level of humility in action would have appealed to me, and I would have had lunch with that person. That's what you have to become. You don't have to become a sniveling, vulnerable, completely vulnerable person. You can pick and choose. You don't have to ask everybody you meet. I don't care about any of that. I care about results, man. Results, 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 results. Your life is short. I think Adam Carolla, the comedian, I was watching one of his podcasts, and he's like, I figured I only have about 50,000 good hours as an adult. And I often say, if that's true, whatever the number is, let's just say it's 50,000 good hours in the prime of your life, where you actually are undistracted and able to work. If that's true, 50,000 hours, well, invert it. What if I gave you $50,000? That's all the money you'd ever have for the rest of your life. 50 grand. How stingy would you be with even one of those dollars if you knew you could never replenish it? Can't replenish time. Can't replenish years. So you need effectiveness. Every minute has to count. Every day has to count. If you can, we've talked about these different foundational ones, the worth a damn factor, the changeability, the blue-footed bluebird. This is the next fundamental component. You have to become humility in action, not in words. I want that numerical value. I want you every, a couple times during these 67 days, I want you to write out specifically, okay? Specifically what your score is. It's very easy. Remember, I forget, it was around books. It was around people you've tracked down. It's about hours. It's about dollars you've invested in yourself. Scale on a 1 to 10. 1 is horrible. You haven't really done it at all. 10 is great. Add the 4 together. Divide them by 4. You'll get your average score. That score has to go up during these 67 days. And it needs to go up over the next 18 months, right? So you have the minimum framework for change we've talked about, according to this research, is about, on average, around 66 days, 67 days. Then the next benchmark, Peter F. Drucker, the great business teacher, speaks of, is this 18-month window. So I want you to get your score up by the 18th day, by the 67th day. And then after that, I want you to continue to push it up for a minimum of the next 18 months. If you do this, you're going to start seeing the things that you want. You must get out there. So practical takeaways. I want you to read more, listen to more audiobooks, do it with the framework of I'm Robin Hood trying to find that one piece of gold that this rich person that I'm in this book has. That don't be like most people. If they find somebody who they're reading this book and one flaw, quote unquote flaw, or one thing you don't agree with, they throw it all out. No, you're just looking for one piece of gold that they have. You can learn one piece of gold from people who aren't perfect people. There are no perfect people. There are no perfect mentors. There are no perfect coaches. There's just humans. But there's humans that have insight on particular areas. Grab that insight. I want you going out in person to more seminars, to more live events in your city. There's free ones if you don't have any money. There's paid ones. I want you getting out, finding people doing what you want to do, whether it be in business, health, and spending a lot of hours with them. If it's in business, spend time. Like Sam Walton said, he spent more time in his competitor's store than his own store. I need you spending more time, if you're in business, in your competitor. How many hours a day, how many hours a week, how many hours a month have you built whatever you're trying to do? Have you spent around people already doing what you want to do? It needs to go up. The hours have to go up. I can't make your life change. You can make your life change. I'm just pointing the way. That's clear. That's clear. How much money are you spending to learn? Like I talked about this guy I met, Romeo, recently. Spent $1 million learning how to invest in real estate, doing short sales in real estate. Now he makes millions of dollars. He had the humility to say, I don't know, and I'm willing to fork over my hard-earned money. Start with books. They're not that expensive. But make sure you're spending a lot of money on books. We're going to talk about another 67 step, my $32,000 Amazon budget. These is all humility in action, not in words. Remember the Jesus Christ parable? 2 sons. One says, I will do it and doesn't, and the other says, I won't and does. It's only the one who does that matters. That's what the whole matter of fact hinges upon. How many airplanes have you how many tickets have you bought and flown across the world to hunt down that one person who will just take you to lunch one time? And when you're there, are you taking notes, or are you just like nonchalantly like, yeah, I don't really, this guy might have some insight? No. You're Robin Hood. You're going to take every little morsel. You're going to be like Michael Jordan. Dean Smith's going to say about you, most teachable person I've ever met. Listened the most and then went out and actually implemented. I want that to be the compliment that you get from people. Let me just say this. You don't need to learn from everybody. We're going to talk about that. One of Alan Nation told me. It's okay to ignore 99 out of 100 people. I'm just saying when you find the one person. In the books, you don't need to read every book. Go to my books list on my site, tylopez.com/books.bhb. You can get that link there and go through those books. You don't need to read every book. There's 130 million books. But read the top 100 books over and over again. That's a humble attribute. A lot of people, when they read, they're just trying to like check off a list and have entertainment. I'm like, why don't you read the same books over and over? I do. It works to read the same thing over and over. You don't need 100 mentors. Jeff Bezos from Amazon, he just read the Sam Walton book over and over and over again to the point where he memorized it. Memorize quotes. Get humility in action, and the payoff for you is going to be huge. So here, to complete this list, I need you to write this both in your journal, pen and paper. It's important you do it in paper. You should have a success journal for the 67 steps that you're writing out, okay? And then, of course, write it on this page as a comment, because that will mark this as completed. So the question is, what's the number one area you have not been humble in action? The options are health, wealth, love, and happiness. Okay? The number one area. So maybe for you it's like, I've got this business, but I never study my competitors, or I've got this, I want to find love, but I keep going on dates that all work out horribly, and I haven't been going out with my friends who are really good with women or really good with men and have really the relationship quality that I want. Or maybe you're like, oh, I'm overweight and I've just been lamenting how overweight I am, but I haven't been seeking out people who used to be overweight who are now thin, whether it be in books or in person or in seminars, and saying, I don't really know what I'm doing. What am I doing wrong? Doesn't seem to be working. And then listening and writing down. So pick an area, be as specific as you can that you have not been humble enough on, that's keeping you from getting the good life. For some of you, it's things, intangibles, happiness, fulfillment. What is it? And most importantly, a tangible thing you're going to do different today. It can be buy a book. It can be attend that seminar you should be attending. It should be get on a plane and go visit this one person you heard of. Send them an email and say, can I take you to lunch? Whatever it is, what's the action step? This is not cheesy little assignments I do. This is legit. Remember, Jeff Bezos made $38 billion. He walked around with a notebook everywhere he was, writing stuff down. He was humble enough to say, they said with Jeff Bezos, it always seemed like maybe he was about to forget a thought. He was humble enough to go, I'm not an infallible human. I need to write this stuff down. That's another level of humility. Jeff Bezos was a cocky guy outwardly, but boy, when he got around the right person, he listened. Sam Walton, Warren Buffett, think about Alexander the Great. He conquered the known world starting at 19, done before he was like 30 or 31. How did he do that? Well, he started listening at 14, 15, 16. Greatest teachers. Fascinating thing about Alexander the Great, as he traveled the world, conquering the world, he brought a library with him. He had books shipped to him wherever he went because he was humble enough to realize he had to keep learning. He had to keep on top of things. Amazing. Alexander the Great. So what's your action plan? Just pick one. I know there's lots of stuff we all need to do. I got lots of stuff. Just pick one for now. One main area that you haven't been out, you haven't not had humility in action, and one specific thing that will be an action item towards that. Just get some momentum rolling, okay? This is during the 67 days. Then you can continue it on, do this for the rest of your life. The dividends are big. You want to live big. You want to live with impact. You want to change the world. You want to be remembered for doing something, not like the masses that just come and go and nobody remembers. Do you want to, I don't know how to say this I want to pick my word carefully. Do you want to have the meaningful life is really what I'm trying to say. As Martin Seligman calls it, the authentic life and the meaningful life. If you want the meaningful life, be humble enough to say you don't have the answers. Have that hands and knees going to jail, right now flashcards, crawling around on floors in Brazil level of humility. And if you do, the reward will be bigger than you can possibly imagine. Make sure you write this down both on the website here, mark the comment complete,